Hello, story lovers. Tonight, we're diving into a tale of passion, secrets, and choices that could change everything. Hearts will be broken, love will be tested, and every twist will leave you on the edge of your seat. Comment below where you're watching from, and if this story moves you, hit like, subscribe. Share it with someone who loves a powerful love story, and tap the bell so you never miss the next thrilling chapter. Ready? Let's begin. The vineyards of Napa Valley shimmered under the late afternoon sun, stretching in perfect rows across the rolling hills, each leaf catching the light like a piece of glass. The wedding venue sat in the middle of this lush paradise, a grand estate that looked as though it had been plucked from a European countryside and set down among California's finest vineyards. Inside the hall, crystal chandeliers scattered 1,000 stars of light across the marble floor, while outside, the scent of roses and lavender carried on the breeze. Guests moved about in gowns of silk and tailored suits, holding champagne flutes that sparkled in the sun. A quartet of violinists played in the corner, their music weaving a delicate thread of romance through the crowd. It was a scene of opulence, the kind of wedding that appeared in glossy magazines, where every detail shimmered with perfection. At the center of it all stood Celeste Morgan, the bride, luminous in a gown of satin and lace that seemed to glow under the chandeliers. Her veil cascaded behind her like a trail of silver light, and her groom, a respected cardiologist, kept her hand firmly in his as the photographers swarmed around them. Celeste laughed, radiant, the sound bright and effortless. Friends clustered at her side, whispering how lucky she was, how perfect she looked, how charmed her life had always been. She was, as always, the twin who dazzled the world. On the far edge of the hall, at a table tucked near the wall, sat Clara Morgan. The resemblance between her and Celeste was uncanny. The same almond-shaped eyes, the same delicate jawline. Where Celeste shone, Clara seemed invisible. She wore a navy dress she had designed herself, elegant and understated. Yet compared to the extravagance swirling around her, it seemed almost too quiet. Clara swirled the last sip of wine in her glass and lifted it to her lips, her smile polite and practiced, though inside she felt the familiar ache of being overlooked from the next table. Two women leaned close, their voices pitched just enough to carry. "Celeste is so lucky," one whispered, eyes shining. "Married to a doctor, can you imagine? A dream come true?" The other gave a soft laugh, and poor Clara, still single, she must feel awful today. Clara kept her eyes on her glass, letting the words slip over her like a wave. She had no strength to fight. It had always been this way. Since childhood, she had been the other twin, the quiet one, the shadow who walked beside the star. She loved her sister dearly, but comparisons had clung to her like a second skin. Celeste, the radiant; Clara, the reserved; Celeste, the chosen; Clara, the forgotten. She had carved out her own life as an interior designer, pouring herself into a small studio in San Francisco, where she could create beauty on her own terms, away from the endless spotlight. Yet tonight, amid the luxury of this wedding, that independence seemed small, fragile, against the roar of admiration directed toward her sister. The contrast pressed harder as the evening unfolded. On the dance floor, Celeste tossed her bouquet into a circle of eager bridesmaids, their laughter ringing through the hall. Clara stayed seated, her fingers curling around her glass, praying no one would drag her forward. When the bouquet was caught by a squealing cousin, applause erupted. Clara forced a smile, but the hollow weight in her chest only grew heavier. She glanced at her phone beneath the table, checking the time. Barely 8 o'clock, far too early to escape. The violinist shifted into a waltz, and couples streamed onto the polished floor. Clara watched as silk skirts twirled and black shoes glided, the scene a blur of harmony and romance. Her heart tightened. She imagined the whispers that might circle even now. Look at her, still alone. The twin without a partner, the one who never quite measured up. She pressed her palm to the tablecloth, grounding herself. She would not cry at her sister's wedding. Not here, not tonight. The scent of cologne brushed past her, sharp and unexpected. She lifted her eyes, expecting another guest searching for a seat. Instead, she found herself staring at a man whose presence seemed to silence the room. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a suit so perfectly cut it carried the weight of power. His hair was dark, his features sharp, his expression unreadable. There was something in his eyes, steel gray and unwavering, that made people stop mid-conversation. Heads turned. A ripple of awareness spread outward as if the air itself had shifted. Clara blinked, startled. The man paused only a moment, then pulled out the empty chair beside her and sat with deliberate calm, as though it had always been his place. She opened her mouth to protest, but before a word formed, he leaned closer, his voice low and smooth, brushing her ear like a secret. "Pretend you are with me." Clara froze, her pulse stumbling. She turned, meeting those gray eyes, the intensity of his gaze making her breath catch. "Excuse me?" she whispered, uncertain if she had heard correctly. He did not look at her. His eyes stayed fixed across the room, toward a small group of guests who had paused to watch. "They are staring," he murmured. "Oh, if you do not mind, let us make them believe." The whispers had already begun. The forgotten twin was no longer alone. A mysterious stranger had claimed the seat beside her, and curiosity surged like fire through the crowd. Clara felt heat flood her cheeks. In one breath, a man she did not know had rewritten her place in the story. She did not know his name or his reasons, only that her solitude had ended in an instant. She hesitated, her heart pounding, torn between disbelief and a strange flicker of anticipation. Slowly, almost against her will, she gave the smallest of nods. The man leaned back, one arm resting casually on the table, his presence so natural it seemed inevitable. Around them, the murmurs grew, speculation buzzing in the air. Clara gripped her glass, her fingers trembling, realizing with sudden clarity that nothing about this night would ever be the same. The man who had settled beside Clara carried with him an aura that demanded attention. Even without a formal introduction, the murmurs of recognition spread quickly across the tables. Damian Hail, his name whispered through the air like a current, passing from one guest to another until nearly everyone in the hall seemed to know who he was. Damian Hail, the billionaire who had built an empire in artificial intelligence and robotics, the man whose inventions were said to be reshaping industries, the elusive figure who rarely appeared at public gatherings unless compelled. The best man leaned toward another guest, his voice low but still audible. "That is Damian. A friend of the groom from his university days. No one sees him at these events. Why is he sitting with the bride's sister?" The ripple of intrigue only sharpened the spotlight already burning on Clara. She shifted in her seat, her heart racing, caught between awe and panic. Damian himself appeared untouched by the attention. He sat with a posture that radiated control, his gaze cool and detached, as though he had calculated every angle of the room and filed it neatly in his mind. The faint gleam of his cufflinks caught the chandelier light, subtle yet deliberate. His presence was not loud, not flamboyant. It was the kind of quiet authority that came from someone who never needed to prove his power because the world already knew. Clara struggled to steady her breath. She had seen his face before, on magazine covers, headlines about his billion-dollar acquisitions and his philanthropic projects. But nothing had prepared her for the force of him up close. His proximity felt overwhelming, as if the air itself had tightened. She whispered cautiously, "Why me?" His lips curved in the faintest hint of a smile, though his eyes never left the distant group still watching. "Because you look like you needed saving as much as I did." Clara blinked, confusion threading through her chest. She wanted to ask more, but Damian was already lifting her glass, filling it with fresh wine as though it were the most natural gesture in the world. A couple nearby gasped softly, watching the way he leaned in close. The way his movements suggested familiarity, Clara felt the weight of 100 eyes on her. It was as though the hall had divided itself into Celeste with her perfect wedding, and Clara suddenly thrust into a role she had never auditioned for. Sitting beside the billionaire, everyone wanted to understand. Damian's voice was low, steady, meant only for her. "Do not look so alarmed. Pretend you know me. Pretend you are not sitting alone." His words struck something in her chest, a mixture of irritation and reluctant relief. For years, she had grown used to invisibility, but tonight, invisibility had been unbearable. Now, without warning, a stranger had turned her into the center of the storm. She managed a whisper. "And what do you get out of this little act?" Damian finally shifted his gaze toward her. The impact was immediate, like being seen for the first time in a way that pierced through all defenses. His gray eyes were sharp, unwavering, but there was a flicker beneath the surface. Something guarded yet vulnerable. "Distraction," he said simply. "There are people here trying to arrange things I do not want. You save me, I save you. Mutual benefit." Clara nearly laughed, though it came out more as a shaky breath. "So you just walk up to a stranger and announce we are together? It worked, did it not?" His answer was calm, almost amused, and the corner of his mouth lifted as though he knew exactly how reckless he sounded. Clara wanted to protest, to tell him that none of this made sense, but the looks on the faces around them silenced her. The whispers had shifted. No longer was she the forgotten twin. Now she was the woman at Damian Hail's side. The one everyone envied and speculated about, her cheeks burned, though whether from embarrassment or something deeper, she could not say. Damian stood suddenly, his chair sliding back without haste. He extended his hand toward her, palm open, an invitation as bold as it was inescapable. "Dance with me," he said. Clara's breath caught. "I do not dance," she muttered quickly. "You do tonight." The firmness of his tone allowed no argument. Against her better judgment, she placed her hand in his. His grip was steady, warm, grounding in a way that startled her. He led her onto the dance floor, where couples parted slightly to make space, curiosity lighting their faces. The violins swelled into a waltz. Clara stumbled at first, her steps clumsy, but Damian's hand at her waist guided her effortlessly. He moved with the kind of ease that came from absolute confidence, every turn precise, every motion measured. Clara's pulse raced as she tried to keep up, her body tense, her mind screaming that she had no business dancing in front of all these people, especially not with him. Yet Damian leaned down, his voice brushing her ear like velvet. "Relax. They are watching. Let them see what they want to see." His words sent a shiver down her spine. She forced her shoulders to loosen, her steps to follow his lead. Slowly, almost miraculously, the movements began to flow. The music lifted them, the room fading until all she could focus on was the steady rhythm of his hand guiding her and the way his gaze anchored hers. Around them, the whispers turned to admiration. Some guests smiled. Others exchanged knowing glances. Celeste, from across the room, watched with wide eyes, her radiant smile faltering for just a moment. When the song ended, Damian did not release Clara immediately. His hand lingered at her waist, his face close enough that she could see the faint scar along his jawline, barely visible beneath the surface. "You did well," he murmured. "I do not understand any of this," Clara whispered back. Breathless, "Neither do I." The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. For a moment, the mask slipped, and she saw something raw beneath the controlled exterior. Pain, maybe, or exhaustion. Something that mirrored the ache she carried inside herself. Then he stepped back, the moment dissolving like smoke. "Meet me outside in 10 minutes, he said quietly. "The terrace overlooking the vineyards?" "If you want answers," before she could respond, he turned and walked away. Disappearing into the crowd with the same ease he had arrived, Clara stood frozen on the dance floor, her heart hammering, her mind spinning. She glanced toward the terrace doors, then back at her table, then at Celeste, who was now laughing with her bridesmaids again, the world revolving around her as it always had. For once, Clara had a choice. She could return to her seat, to the safety of invisibility, or she could walk through those doors and step into something unknown. Something dangerous. Her feet carried her toward the terrace before her mind could catch up. The night air hit her skin, cool and sharp, scented with jasmine and aged oak. The terrace stretched out before her, stone balustrades overlooking rows of darkened vines that seemed to stretch into infinity. Lanterns glowed softly along the edges, casting long shadows. Damian stood at the far end, his back to her, hands in his pockets, staring out at the valley below. Clara approached slowly, her heels clicking softly against the stone. "You came," he said without turning. "You asked?" He turned then. And in the dim light, his features looked softer, more human. The sharp edges of his control had worn thin. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice low. "Before this goes any further," Clara's stomach tightened. "What is it?" Damian hesitated, and for the first time, she saw vulnerability crack through his armor. "The woman I was avoiding inside," he began slowly. "My ex-fiancée. She is here with her new husband. They have been trying to corner me all night to make amends, to play at civility. I cannot do it. Not tonight." Clara's breath caught. "So you used me?" "Yes." His answer was blunt, unflinching. "But not only that." He stepped closer, and the intensity in his eyes made her heart skip. "When I saw you sitting there, alone, looking like you were drowning in a room full of people, I recognized it. Because I feel it too. Every day, we are both ghosts in rooms full of the living, Clara." Her name on his lips sent a jolt through her. She had not told him her name. "How do you know who I am?" A faint smile touched his mouth. "I make it my business to know things. And you are not as invisible as you think." The words should have felt invasive, but instead they felt like validation. Like being seen. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. Damian's gaze held hers, unrelenting. "1 week. Stay with me for 1 week. Be my partner at events, dinners, appearances. Let the world believe we are together. After that, you walk away. No strings. But for 1 week, neither of us has to be alone." Clara's pulse thundered in her ears. It was insane, reckless. A stranger asking her to play a part in his life. To step into a world she did not belong in, but the alternative was returning to her small apartment, to her quiet studio, to the endless echo of being second best. She asked, though her voice lacked conviction. Damian stepped closer still. Close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, because he said softly, "You want to know what it feels like to be seen, and I can give you that." The promise hung in the air between them, dangerous and intoxicating. Clara should have said no. Should have walked away. But instead, she heard herself whisper, "1 week?" Damian's expression shifted, something like relief flooding his features. "1 week," he echoed. Then from behind them, a voice cut through the night like broken glass. "Damian." They both turned. Standing in the terrace doorway was a woman in a crimson gown. Her face pale, her eyes filled with something between desperation and fury. "We need to talk," the woman said, her voice trembling. Now, Damian's entire body went rigid. His jaw clenched, and Clara saw his hands curl into fists at his sides. "Not tonight." "Victoria?" he said, his voice cold as steel. But Victoria stepped forward, her gaze flicking to Clara with barely concealed venom. "Who is she?" Victoria demanded. "Another distraction? Another way to avoid facing what you did?" Clara felt the air shift, tension crackling like lightning about to strike. "Leave," Damian said, his tone brooking no argument, but Victoria's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and when she spoke again, her words shattered the fragile peace of the night. "You cannot run forever, Damian. Not from me. Not from the truth. You know what you are? What you did to us." The accusation hung heavy, and Clara saw something in Damian's face collapse, just for a heartbeat. Before the mask slammed back into place, Victoria turned and disappeared back into the hall. Leaving a wake of poison in her absence, Clara stood frozen, her mind reeling. She turned to Damian, questions burning on her tongue. But before she could speak, he looked at her with eyes that were suddenly, devastatingly empty. "If you are smart," he said quietly, "you will walk away right now." Clara stared at him, her heart fracturing at the raw pain in his voice. "What did she mean?" Clara whispered. Damian turned back to the vineyards, his shoulders tense. His silence louder than any answer, and Clara realized, with a cold clarity that settled in her bones, that the man who had saved her tonight was drowning in ghosts of his own. Asterisk. The penthouse overlooked San Francisco like a kingdom suspended in glass and steel. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city lights, a constellation of gold and white stretching toward the bay. Inside, everything was sharp lines and muted tones, expensive and cold. A space designed for someone who had learned to live without warmth. Clara stood in the middle of the living room, her overnight bag still clutched in one hand, feeling like an intruder in a museum. It had been 3 days since the wedding, 3 days since she had agreed to Damian's arrangement, and every hour felt like walking a tightrope without a net. Damian emerged from the hallway, dressed in a charcoal sweater and dark jeans, his hair still damp from a shower. The casual clothes made him look younger, less guarded. Though his eyes still carried that weight she was beginning to recognize as permanent. "You do not have to stand there like you are waiting for permission," he said, a faint edge of amusement in his voice. "This is your home for the next 4 days." Clara set her bag down slowly. "It does not feel like home. It feels like a stage. Maybe that is what it is." The honesty startled her. Damian moved to the kitchen, pouring 2 glasses of wine with the ease of someone accustomed to his own company. He handed one to Clara, their fingers brushing for just a moment. The contact sent a spark through her skin. "Tonight we have dinner with a board member and his wife," Damian said, leaning against the counter. "Tomorrow, a charity gala. The next night, a private gallery opening. You will smile, stay close, and let them believe what they want to believe." Clara took a sip of wine, the bitterness grounding her. "And what do they want to believe?" "That I am no longer broken." The words fell between them like stones. Clara looked up, meeting his gaze, and saw the cracks beneath the surface widening. "What did Victoria mean?" Clara asked quietly. "At the wedding, when she said 'you know what you did'?" Damian's jaw tightened. For a long moment, he said nothing, his fingers drumming against his glass. Then he exhaled, slow and controlled. "We were engaged 2 years ago," he began, his voice flat. "I was different then. Believed in things like partnership, trust. Victoria worked at one of my companies, brilliant, ambitious. I thought we wanted the same future." He paused, staring into his wine as though it held answers. "Then I found out she had been selling proprietary information to a competitor. For months, using me, using what I built, to advance her own career." His voice went colder. "When I confronted her, she turned it around. Told everyone I was controlling, paranoid. That I had accused her without proof because I could not handle a woman being my equal." Clara felt her chest tighten. "But you had proof." "I did. But by the time I could prove it, the damage was done. Half my board questioned my judgment. Investors grew cautious. And Victoria married the CEO of the company she had been leaking to." He looked at Clara then, his eyes hard. "She wants me to forgive her now, to pretend it never happened. As if I can just erase what she did." Clara set her glass down, her hands trembling. "You are not broken, Damian. You do not know that. I know you would not be standing here if you were." Something flickered in his expression, something raw and vulnerable. He stepped closer, the space between them shrinking, until Clara could feel the heat of him. "Why did you agree to this?" he asked, his voice low. "You could have said no. Gone back to your life." Clara looked away, the truth lodging in her throat. "Because I am tired of being invisible. Tired of being the twin no one remembers. For once, I wanted to feel like I mattered." Damian's hand reached out, his fingers tilting her chin up until she had no choice but to meet his eyes. "You matter," he said, and the conviction in his voice made her breath hitch. "You have always mattered. The world was just too blind to see it." As the moment stretched, charged and fragile, Clara felt her heart pounding, felt the pull between them growing stronger, more dangerous. This was not supposed to be real. It was an arrangement, a transaction. But the way Damian was looking at her, the way his thumb brushed against her jaw, made it feel like so much more. Then his phone buzzed, shattering the moment. Damian stepped back, the distance returning, and answered with clipped efficiency. "Hail." A pause. His expression darkened. "I will be there in 20 minutes. He hung up and looked at Clara, regret flickering across his face. Emergency at the office? I have to go now. Now, he grabbed his jacket from the back of a chair. Make yourself comfortable. I will be back before dinner. Then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him, leaving Clara alone in the cavernous penthouse. She wandered through the space, her fingers trailing over the surfaces. Everything was immaculate, sterile. No photographs, no personal touches. It was as though Damian had removed every trace of humanity from his home, leaving only the shell in his office. She paused. The door was ajar, and curiosity pulled her forward. The room was dominated by a massive desk, a wall of monitors, and floor-tickling bookshelves. Clara stepped inside, her eyes scanning the titles. Mostly technical manuals, business strategy, artificial intelligence. Then she saw it, a folder on the desk, half hidden beneath a stack of papers. The label read, Morgan Clara. Her blood went cold. She reached for it with shaking hands, flipping it open. Inside were printed articles, photographs, details about her life, her studio, her designs, reviews of her work, even a copy of her social media profiles. Annotated with notes in Damian's precise handwriting, her breath came in short gasps. He had researched her. Before the wedding, before he sat down beside her, he had known exactly who she was. The door opened behind her. I forgot my Damian stopped, his eyes landing on the folder in Clara's hands. His face went pale. Clara held up the folder, her voice shaking. You knew? Before you sat down beside me, you knew who I was. Damian said nothing, his silence a damning confirmation. Why? Clara demanded, her voice rising. Why would you research me? Why would you target me? It was not like that, Damian said, stepping forward, but Clara backed away. Then what was it like? Tell me the truth, Damian. For once, tell me the truth. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration and guilt warring on his face. I saw you a year ago. At a design expo in the city? You were presenting your work, and I stopped to listen. You were passionate, brilliant, completely unaware of how extraordinary you were. I remembered you. Clara stared at him, her mind reeling. So when you needed someone for your arrangement, you chose me. Calculated, deliberate. Yes, his answer was stark, unflinching. But not for the reasons you think. Then enlighten me. Damian moved closer, his voice dropping to something almost desperate. Because I knew you would understand. I knew you carried the same loneliness I did. I did not choose you because you were convenient, Clara. I chose you because I recognized you. You used me, Clara whispered, her eyes burning. Just like Victoria used you. The accusation hit him like a physical blow. His face drained of color, and for a moment, he looked utterly shattered. I am not her, he said, his voice barely audible. Prove it. The challenge hung between them, and Damian's jaw worked, as though he was fighting against something inside himself. Then, without warning, he closed the distance and kissed her. It was not gentle. It was fierce, desperate, a collision of all the tension that had been building between them. Clara gasped against his mouth, her hands fisting in his shirt, torn between pushing him away and pulling him closer, when they broke apart. Both breathing hard, Damian pressed his forehead to hers. I am sorry, he whispered. For all of it. But I am not sorry I found you. Clara's heart hammered, her mind spinning. She should walk away. Should demand answers, should protect herself. But the heat of him, the rawness in his voice, the way his hands trembled against her waist, made it impossible to think clearly. I need time, she managed. I need to think. Damian nodded, stepping back, his expression carefully neutral. Take all the time you need. But as Clara turned to leave the office, her phone buzzed. She glanced down, and her blood turned to ice. It was a message from an unknown number. Attached was a photograph of her and Damian on the terrace at the wedding, intimate and close. The text below read, How much is he paying you to play pretend? Does your sister know her twin is a fraud? Clara's hand shook. She looked up at Damian, her face pale. Someone knows, she whispered. Damian took the phone from her hands, his expression darkening as he read the message. "Victoria," he said coldly, "how do you know?" "Because this is exactly what she does. Manipulate, threaten, destroy." Clara felt panic rising in her chest. "If this gets out, if Celeste finds out I have been lying, she will never forgive me. My family will never forgive me." Damian's hands gripped her shoulders, grounding her. "I will handle this. I will make sure it does not go any further." "How?" His eyes met hers, and in them, Clara saw a darkness she had not seen before, a ruthlessness that sent a chill down her spine. "By doing what I should have done 2 years ago," he said quietly. "By ending her." The weight of his words settled over Clara like a shroud, and she realized, with a sickening clarity, that the man she was beginning to care for was capable of things she could not yet comprehend. And somewhere in the shadows, Victoria was watching, waiting, ready to tear them both apart. The charity gala blazed with 1,000 lights. The grand ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel transformed into a palace of gold and crystal. Waiters glided through the crowd with champagne, while a string orchestra played beneath vaulted ceilings painted with cherubs and clouds. San Francisco's elite moved in elegant clusters, their laughter polished, their smiles sharp as knives. Clara stood beside Damian, her hand resting in the crook of his arm, wearing a gown he had chosen for her. Midnight blue silk that caught the light with every movement, elegant and understated, yet impossibly expensive. She felt like an imposter draped in borrowed armor, surrounded by people who could smell pretense the way sharks smelled blood. But Damian's presence beside her was steady, grounding. His hand covered hers, warm and reassuring. And every time someone approached to congratulate him or ask about his mysterious companion, he deflected with practiced ease. "Clara is a designer," he would say, his voice filled with quiet pride. "One of the most talented in the city." Each time, Clara felt something twist in her chest, half gratitude, half guilt. Because this was a performance. And yet it was beginning to feel dangerously real. 3 days had passed since the threatening message. 3 days of Damian working behind the scenes, making calls, pulling strings, doing whatever it took to contain Victoria's poison before it spread. He had promised Clara it was handled, that Victoria would not dare release anything now. But Clara could not shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the ground to crumble. Across the ballroom, she caught sight of Victoria. The woman stood near the bar, elegant in crimson, her eyes fixed on Damian with an intensity that made Clara's skin crawl. Beside Victoria was a man in his 50s, silver-haired and confident. Her husband, Clara assumed. The CEO who had built his empire on stolen secrets. "She is watching us," Clara murmured. Damian followed her gaze, his jaw tightening. "Let her watch. You said you handled it." "I did." But there was something in his voice, a tension that betrayed uncertainty. Before Clara could press further, a woman in emerald green approached, her smile bright and predatory. "Damian Hail," she purred, "you have been hiding from us." Damian's expression shifted into practiced charm. "Mrs. Chen, always a pleasure. And who is this lovely creature?" Mrs. Chen's eyes raked over Clara with thinly veiled assessment. "Clara Morgan," Damian said smoothly. "My partner." The word sent a jolt through Clara. Partner. Not date, not companion. Partner. Mrs. Chen's eyebrows lifted. "Morgan? Any relation to Celeste Morgan? The cardiologist's new wife?" Clara's throat tightened. "She is my sister." "Ah, the twin." Mrs. Chen's smile sharpened. "How delightful. Though you are quite different from her, are you not?" The barb landed precisely where intended. Clara felt the old shame rising, the familiar weight of comparison, but Damian's hand tightened on hers, and when he spoke, his voice carried an edge that made Mrs. Chen's smile falter. "Clara is incomparable," he said coldly. "If you will excuse us." He guided Clara away before Mrs. Chen could respond, his grip firm but gentle. They moved through the crowd toward the terrace doors, seeking air, seeking escape. Outside, the night was cool and quiet. the city lights spreading below them like scattered diamonds. Clara leaned against the balustrade, her hands shaking. "I am sorry," she whispered. "For what?" "For not being enough. For people like her seeing through this." Damian turned her to face him, his hands framing her face with a tenderness that stole her breath. "You are more than enough," he said fiercely. "You are everything." Then he kissed her, and this time it was not desperate or calculated. It was soft, searching, as though he was trying to memorize the shape of her lips, the taste of her breath. Clara's hands slid up his chest, her fingers curling into his jacket, and for a moment, the world fell away. When they parted, both breathless, Damian rested his forehead against hers. "Stop being pretend for me 3 days ago," he whispered. Clara's heart stuttered. "Damian, I know. I know this was not the agreement, but I cannot keep lying to you, Clara. Not about this." She wanted to say she felt the same, wanted to confess that every moment with him had carved itself deeper into her heart. But fear held her tongue. Fear that this was too fast, too fragile, too likely to shatter. Before she could respond, the terrace doors opened, and a man stepped out. Victoria's husband. He approached with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Damian," he said smoothly, "we need to talk." Damian's entire body went rigid. "Not interested, Marcus? It is about Victoria. In your current situation," Marcus glanced at Clara, his smile widening. "Perhaps your partner should hear this too." Clara felt dread coil in her stomach. Damian stepped forward, placing himself between Clara and Marcus. "Whatever you have to say, say it to me." Marcus pulled out his phone, tapping the screen before holding it up. On the display was a video. Clara's heart sank as she recognized the footage. It was from the wedding, but not the terrace. It was from earlier, from inside the venue, showing Damian approaching Clara's table. The audio was clear. "Pretend you are with me." Marcus's smile was venomous. "Victoria has been collecting evidence. Your little arrangement is not as secret as you thought. And unless you agree to our terms, this video, along with several others, will be sent to every major news outlet by morning." Clara felt the ground tilt beneath her. She looked at Damian, saw the rage and helplessness warring in his expression. "What terms?" Damian bit out. "You drop the lawsuit against Victoria. You issue a public statement clearing her name, admitting your accusations were unfounded, and you transfer 10% of your company shares to her as compensation for damages. That is extortion. That is business." Marcus pocketed his phone. "You have until midnight to decide. After that, the world finds out that the great Damian Hail hired a nobody to play his girlfriend. That you manipulated an innocent woman for your own purposes. I wonder what that will do to your reputation, your investors' confidence." He turned to Clara, his expression almost pitying. "And you, Miss Morgan, what will your family think when they discover you have been lying to them, playing dress-up for a billionaire's ego?" Then he walked away, leaving them alone in the wreckage of his words. Clara felt tears burning in her eyes. "This is my fault. If I had not agreed, if I had just walked away—" "No." Damian's voice was sharp, raw. "This is my fault. I brought you into this. I put you in the crosshairs. What are we going to do?" Damian stared out at the city, his jaw working. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "I'm going to give them what they want." Clara's head snapped up. "What? No, you cannot let them win." "I will not let them destroy you, Clara. Your family, your reputation. You do not deserve to be collateral damage in my war with Victoria. And you deserve to surrender everything you fought for. To let her win? If it protects you? Yes." The selflessness of it broke something in Clara. She grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. "Do not do this. There has to be another way. There is not." His eyes were filled with a resignation that terrified her. "I made a choice the moment I sat down beside you. I chose you over everything else, and I would make that choice again." Clara felt tears spill down her cheeks. "Damian, please." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, and she felt the tremor in his body, the barely contained emotion. "I am sorry," he whispered into her hair. "For dragging you into my mess? For making you care. For not being strong enough to protect you? They stood there, clinging to each other as the night grew colder. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, then Clara's phone buzzed. She pulled it from her clutch with shaking hands. It was a message from Celeste. "We need to talk. Now. I know what you have been doing." Clara's blood turned to ice. She looked up at Damian, her face pale. "She knows." Damian took the phone, reading the message, and Clara saw something in his expression crumble. "I will fix this," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "How do you fix this, Damian?" He had no answer. The terrace doors burst open, and Celeste appeared, her face flushed with anger. Behind her, Clara's parents emerged, their expressions a mixture of confusion and disappointment. "Clara," Celeste said, her voice shaking, "is it true? Have you been lying to us? Pretending to be with him for money?" "It is not like that," Clara started, but her voice broke. Her father stepped forward, his face hard. "We received an email. With evidence, videos, messages, explaining everything." Victoria. She had sent it anyway. Even knowing Damian would surrender, she had sent it to hurt them both. Clara felt her world collapsing. She looked at her sister, saw the betrayal in Celeste's eyes, and knew that no explanation would be enough. "I am sorry," Clara whispered. "I am so sorry." But Celeste turned away, her shoulders shaking, and their mother followed, leaving Clara standing alone in the ruins of her family's trust. Damian reached for her, but Clara stepped back, her vision blurred with tears. "This is over," she said, her voice hollow. "We are done, Clara, please. You promised you would protect me. You promised this would not happen. I tried. You failed." The words were cruel, designed to cut, and she saw them land in his eyes like knives. But she could not stop. The pain was too much, the loss too great. "I should never have trusted you," she said, her voice breaking. "I should have known better." She turned and ran, her heels clicking against the stone, her gown flowing behind her like a river of midnight. She did not look back, did not let herself see the devastation on Damian's face. Behind her, in the wreckage of the gala, Damian stood alone, watching the only thing that had ever mattered to him disappear into the night and in the shadows. Victoria smiled. 2 weeks passed like centuries. Clara returned to her studio in the Mission District, to the small space filled with fabric swatches and design sketches, to the life she had built in careful solitude. But everything felt different now. The walls that had once felt like sanctuary now felt like a cage. She had not spoken to her family. Celeste's calls went unanswered, her parents' messages deleted before she could read them. The shame was too heavy, the betrayal too raw. She had become exactly what they had always feared, the twin who could not measure up, who had tried to grasp at something beyond her reach and fallen. The story had made the blogs, though not as explosively as Victoria had threatened. Damian had done something, pulled some strings, contained the damage enough that it remained gossip rather than scandal. But Clara had seen the headlines anyway. Billionaire Damian Hail's fake romance exposed interior. Designer caught an elaborate scheme. Her phone had rung constantly for 3 days. Reporters, former clients asking for clarification, old acquaintances pretending concern while fishing for details. She had turned it off, unplugged from the world, and let the silence consume her. She told herself she did not think about Damian. It was a lie. She thought about him constantly. The way his hand had felt against hers, the raw honesty in his voice when he had said she mattered, the devastation in his eyes when she had walked away. But she had done the right thing. She had protected herself. She had ended it before it could hurt her more. The lie tasted bitter even in her thoughts. On the 14th day, a knock came at her studio door. Clara ignored it at first, assuming it was another reporter. But the knocking persisted, gentle but insistent. "Clara." The voice was familiar, soft. "I know you are in there. Please, Celeste." Clara's hands froze over the fabric she had been cutting. Part of her wanted to stay silent, to wait until her sister gave up and left. But a larger part, the part that had been aching with loneliness, could not resist. She opened the door. Celeste stood in the hallway. Dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup, no polish. Just her sister, looking tired and sad. "Can I come in?" Celeste asked quietly. Clara stepped aside, and Celeste entered, her eyes scanning the studio with genuine interest. She had never been here before. Their worlds had always existed in parallel, never quite intersecting. "It is beautiful," Celeste said, running her fingers over a bolt of emerald silk. "Your work." "I had no idea it was this incredible." Clara said nothing, her throat tight. Celeste turned to face her, and there were tears in her eyes. "I am sorry." Clara blinked, startled. "You are sorry?" "Celeste, I am the one who lied to you. You lied because I made you feel like you had to." Celeste's voice broke. "Because I have spent our entire lives taking up all the space, all the attention, and I never once stopped to ask if you were okay, if you were happy. I just assumed you were fine being invisible because it was easier for me." Clara felt her own tears rising. "That is not fair to yourself. It is true." Celeste stepped closer. "When I saw those videos, saw you with Damian, my first thought was not that you had lied. It was that you looked happy, truly happy, and I realized I'd never seen you look that way before." "It was not real," Clara whispered. "Was it not?" Celeste's gaze was knowing, gentle, "Because it looked real to me. The way he looked at you, the way you looked at him." "That was not acting, Clara. That was two people falling in love." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. She shook her head, but Celeste caught her hands. "You love him," Celeste said softly, "and unless I am very mistaken, he loves you too." "It does not matter. It is over." "Why?" "Because he used me. He researched me, chose me deliberately, manipulated me into his scheme." Celeste smiled sadly. "And you think I did not choose my husband deliberately? That I did not research him, make sure he was exactly what I wanted before I ever spoke to him?" "Clara, every relationship starts with a choice. With someone seeing something in another person and deciding to take a chance. That is not manipulation. That is just being human." Clara pulled her hands free, turning away. "You do not understand? Then help me understand." The gentleness in Celeste's voice cracked something open in Clara's chest. She found herself talking, the words pouring out in a flood. About the wedding, about Damian's proposition, about the week that followed, about Victoria's threats, about the moment on the terrace when Damian had said she was everything, about the horrible collapse at the gala when she finished. Celeste was crying too. "He was willing to give up everything for you," Celeste whispered. "Do you understand that? He was going to surrender to Victoria, let her destroy him, just to protect you, and I threw it back in his face. So fix it."
"Oh."
Clara looked at her sister, her vision blurred. "How? How do I fix this?" Celeste smiled through her tears. "You go to him. You tell him the truth. You stop running from the one person who actually sees you. Right? What if it is too late? What if it is not?" The possibility hung in the air, fragile and terrifying. Clara felt something shift in her chest, a crack of light breaking through the darkness. "I do not know if I am brave enough," she whispered. Celeste pulled her into a hug, holding her tightly. "You are the bravest person I know. You just never let yourself believe it." That night, Clara stood outside Damian's building, staring up at the glowing penthouse windows. Her heart hammered in her chest, her palms slick with sweat. She had no plan, no prepared speech, just a desperate need to see him, to tell him she was sorry. To try to salvage something from the wreckage, she made it to his door, raised her hand to knock, and froze. Through the partially opened door, she could hear voices. Damian's voice, low and measured, and another voice, female, familiar. Victoria Clara's blood ran cold. She stepped closer, peering through the gap, and saw them standing in the living room. Victoria was crying, her makeup smudged, her posture defeated. Damian stood with his back to the window, his expression unreadable. "Please," Victoria was saying, her voice ragged. I know I do not deserve it. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I am asking anyway. Give me a chance to make it right. Clara felt her heart shatter. She had come too late. Damian had moved on, had chosen to forgive Victoria. To give her another chance, she turned to leave, but her foot caught on the doorframe, and the sound made Damian's head snap toward the entrance. Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, time stopped. Clara saw everything in his gaze. Shock, pain, desperate hope. Then Victoria turned, her expression shifting from tears to cold triumph in an instant. Clara, Victoria said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. How unexpected. Damian moved toward the door, but Clara was already backing away. I should not have come, she stammered. Clara, wait. Damian's voice was urgent, raw. This is not what it looks like. It never is. She turned and ran, the same pattern repeating itself. Running from pain, from vulnerability, from the risk of being hurt again. But this time Damian followed. His footsteps echoed in the hallway, his voice calling her name. She made it to the elevator, but he caught the door before it closed, stepping inside with her. Please, he said, breathing hard. Let me explain. You do not owe me an explanation. We are not together. We were never really together. That is a lie, and you know it. The elevator doors opened into the lobby, and Clara pushed past him, heading for the street. But Damian grabbed her hand, pulling her to a stop. Victoria came to confess, he said urgently. Marcus left her, took everything in the divorce. She is broke, desperate, and wanted to apologize. I was telling her to leave when you arrived. Clara stared at him, her chest heaving. Why should I believe you? Because I love you. The words stopped her cold. Damian stepped closer, his gray eyes burning with intensity. I love you, Clara Morgan. I have loved you since the moment I watched you present your designs a year ago. Since the moment you sat alone at that wedding looking like you carried the weight of the world. I chose you, yes. But not because you were convenient. Because you were extraordinary. And every day since has only proved me right. Tears streamed down Clara's face. You hurt me. I know. And I will spend the rest of my life making up for it if you let me. He took her hands, his grip trembling. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am asking for a chance. One real chance. No pretending. No arrangements. Just us, figuring out if this could be something real. Clara looked at him, at the vulnerability in his face, at the love shining in his eyes, and felt the last of her defenses crumble. I love you too, she whispered. I have been terrified to admit it, but I do. Damian's face transformed, relief and joy flooding his features. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the only thing anchoring him to the earth. I am sorry, he murmured into her hair, for all of it. For the research, for not being honest from the start, for letting Victoria hurt you. I am sorry too. For running, for not trusting you. They stood there in the middle of the lobby, oblivious to the curious glances of passers-by, holding each other like they had been drowning and had finally found air. When they finally pulled apart, Damian cupped her face, his thumbs brushing away her tears. What do we do now? Clara asked softly. We start over. Properly this time. I take you to dinner, learn your favorite food, meet your family the right way. We build something real. Clara smiled through her tears. That sounds terrifying, good. The best things always are. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. And Clara kissed him back, no longer afraid of being seen, no longer afraid of taking up space, because she had finally learned the truth. She had always been enough. She had always mattered. She had just needed someone to help her see it. 6 months later, Clara stood in the same vineyard where this had all begun. But this time, it was her wedding. Small, intimate, surrounded only by the people who truly mattered. Celeste stood beside her as maid of honor, their relationship rebuilt into something stronger. More honest, and Damian waited at the altar, his eyes never leaving hers, his love written in every line of his face as she walked down the aisle. Clara felt no shadow, no comparison, no weight of invisibility. Just the lightness of being seen, of being chosen, of being loved exactly as she was. When she reached Damian, he took her hand, and she saw her own joy reflected in his eyes. "Ready?" he whispered. "Ready," she whispered back, and together they stepped into the rest of their lives, no longer pretending, no longer hiding, just two broken souls who had found wholeness in each other. The end.